When the first railhead fills with 73-ton Abrams and 27.6-ton Bradleys, this stops being a story about another warning flare in the Middle East and becomes a story about whether the United States can turn steel, fuel, crews, and port access into usable combat power before the battlefield moves again. An armored brigade move is not a symbolic gesture. The Army has shown that one brigade package can mean about 4,000 soldiers, more than 2,000 pieces of equipment, and weeks of synchronized rail, port, stevedore, and ship loading just to get the heavy force to water. That is why the dangerous signal is not the first speech, the first drone, or the first exchange across a border, but the moment the logistics machine begins to lock in. In June 2024, one vessel arriving in Denmark delivered 737 vehicles and equipment pieces, while Army deployment planners have noted that a brigade combat team typically carries around 3,000 pieces of cargo, and Army seaport planners have stressed that more than 90% of military cargo in war plans moves by sealift, with one LMSR offering capacity roughly equal to 400 C-17 aircraft. As James Mattis put it, "If you cannot move, you are not lethal." And that is exactly why any surge of Abrams, Bradleys, M88 recovery vehicles, fuelers, and support trucks toward the Gulf would mark the beginning of a far bigger contest than a single strike alone. The real hinge sits farther south, inside the warehouses and hardstands that let Washington skip the slowest phase of heavy war and start with ready metal already in theater. In Southwest Asia, the Army maintains equipment for 2 armor brigades, with one brigade set in Kuwait and a second set, including division headquarters equipment in Qatar, where a 262-acre climate-controlled facility was built to store and maintain a brigade-sized set for rapid movement by land, sea, or air across the region. That matters because prepositioned armor is not parked steel, but compressed time. APS-5 issued 2,222 pieces of combat, configured equipment in one package, then later pushed out a full armored brigade combat team set over 19 days, finishing 5 days early with more than 13,000 fully mission-capable pieces and an overall 99% fully mission-capable rate. In one 2018 readiness report, the APS-5 set posted 90% combat readiness and 89% sustainment readiness, even under active use. As Coltal Carmelia Scott Skillen said, "Having APS-5 equipment sets in such a high state of readiness helps us better project power. And that readiness means M1A2, Abrams with 120mm guns and 1,500 horsepower turbine engines, M2A3 Bradleys armed with the 25mm M242, Bushmaster Tau missiles, and 7.62mm machine guns, M109 Paladins, M798 fuel trucks, and M88 recovery vehicles can be drawn, checked, fueled, and pushed forward before an adversary finishes reading the map. After the armor is drawn and crews are alerted, the next battle is fought at the pier, because a tank column means nothing until it is staged, inspected, marshaled, and driven into steel hulls in the right order. During Defender Europe 20, the 842nd Transportation Battalion moved 17 units equipment through the port of Beaumont and Port Arthur, processed around 6,000 pieces over 3 months, and did it with a unit that capped. Jennifer Meyer said had only 6 active duty soldiers, 25 Department of the Army civilians, and about 27 reserve soldiers on orders, a reminder that strategic movement often rests on a surprisingly small command node rather than on mass alone. That is where sealift becomes brutally concrete. The Navy states that an LMSR can carry 58 tanks, 48 other tracked vehicles, and more than 900 trucks and wheeled vehicles, with over 380,000 square feet of cargo space, a length of 951, 4 feet, a speed of 24 knots, and 2 cranes rated at 110 tons for austere offload conditions. Lieutenant Cole Gordon Vincent described the math clearly. "Our unit is small in size and the strategic impact is significant," adding that commercial partners, longshore labor, rail access, berth space, and simultaneous vessel operations are what let the Army move at speed, which means any Gulf surge would depend not only on Abrams, Bradleys, M109, A6 Paladins, and M88A2 Hercules vehicles, but on whether the port system can keep loading without pause. Heavy armor can reach the Gulf faster than many assume, but only if the flow is wrapped inside an air and missile shield strong enough to keep ports, airfields, and staging ramps alive under pressure. In official Army doctrine cited by Army University Press, the service's theater role includes port and airfield opening, logistics, ground-based air defense, and reception, staging, onward movement, and integration. Which is a blunt way of saying, Abrams and Bradleys do not move alone. They move with Patriot crews, THAAD elements, radar detachments, and the engineers who keep the receiving nodes open under threat. That protection layer is under strain. Secretary of the Army Christine Wormuth said that, "Our Patriots, for example, are probably our most stressed force element," adding that the Army uses Patriots to protect our forces out in the Middle East, while also admitting the service has only a finite number of batteries. That matters because a C-17 can haul 102 troops or 170,900 pounds of cargo over about 2,400 nautical miles, land on a 3,500-foot runway, and back into austere airfields, but airlift becomes fragile if the arrival base sits under missile threat. A serious surge would therefore pair armored draw sets with PAC-3 MSE reloads, THAAD launchers tied to AN, TPY-2 radar coverage, counter-UAS batteries, and runway defense teams before the first long convoy ever rolls. Without that shield, speed becomes exposure, and exposure becomes delay and hesitation. Even after the ships unload, the harder problem begins, feeding armored combat at a pace fast enough to keep momentum. One Army article notes that a single Abrams carries about 500 gallons of fuel, that a 14-tank company needs roughly 7,000 gallons for a full load, and that crews also roll with 42 main gun rounds each, while Bradley planning figures have long used about 175 gallons per vehicle, which means an armored push is really a moving demand signal for tankers, ammo handlers, mechanics, and recovery crews, as much as it is a show of firepower. That is why sustainment decides whether a surge becomes pressure or stalls into theater noise. Army Sustainment wrote, "Brigade formations do not move without fuel. Equipment does not recover or repair itself. Soldiers do not heal themselves. Ammunition does not distribute itself. And parts do not materialize out of thin air." And the phrase fits the Abrams package perfectly because a disabled 70-ton tank needs an M88, a 2 Hercules, whose main winch can perform 70-ton single-line recovery, whose boom can lift 35 tons just to clear wreckage, change power packs, or drag a crippled vehicle out of a kill zone. In desert heat, every extra mile burns fuel, every broken track burns time, and every missed resupply convoy turns expensive armor into fixed metal waiting for the next strike. And none of that work happens under calm, peacetime conditions. What gives an Abrams surge real bite is not the tank by itself, but the team built around it once contact begins. Army training doctrine and armor branch writing both make the same point. U.S. Ground combat is fought as a combined arms system in which armor, infantry, artillery, engineers, attack aviation, mortars, and command networks are synchronized so that one platform sees, another fixes, and a third kills before the enemy can reset. As an army training text put it, combined arms training must be automatic. While the Chief of Armor wrote that, "Our Army's way of war is fighting as a combined arms team, because speed without integration only produces isolated vehicles, not battlefield shock. That pairing matters in desert war. The M2A3 Bradley can engage 2 targets in the same field of view with its 25mm cannon or 7.62mm gun, fire TOW, while stationary, and carry infantry forward as the Abrams uses its 120mm gun and 1,500 horsepower turbine to punch through the main threat." Army doctrine notes each combined arms battalion carries 4 120mm mortars, and one Army live fire exercise used 4 Bradleys, 2 Abrams, 81mm mortars, 5.0 caliber, and M240 fires in one package, which is a reminder that a Gulf deployment would not send tanks forward as lone predators, but as a layered formation designed to break anti-tank ambushes, cover dismounted movement, and hold tempo after first contact under sustained battlefield friction. An armored surge into the Gulf would meet a defender built to attack the architecture around the tanks, rather than the tanks first. The DIA warns that Iran's missile forces are designed to overwhelm US forces and our partners in the region, and that its swarms of small boats, large inventory of naval mines, and arsenal of anti-ship missiles can severely disrupt maritime traffic through Hormuz. That matters because once the unloading window narrows, every pier, fuel farm, ammunition pad, causeway, and convoy route becomes a target set, and heavy brigades start spending combat power on protection, dispersion, deception, and route clearance before they ever reach the decisive line. CSIS now assesses that Iran fields the largest and most diverse missile arsenal in the Middle East, with thousands of ballistic and cruise missiles, including the Fateh 110 at 200 to 300 kilometers, km, at 700 to 800 kilometers, Zulfiqar at 700 km, Shahab 300 km, and the Rad anti-ship cruise missile at 350 km. Again, Michael Kurilla told the Senate that Iran and its network threaten some of the most vital terrain in the world, and that warning fits the problem exactly. An Abrams brigade can absorb fire, but it cannot ignore drones, queuing missile batteries, loitering munitions over choke points, or sea mines delaying fuel, 120mm rounds, spare track blocks, and M88 parts. The U.S. task there is breaking Iran's kill chain before Iran breaks the deployment rhythm. To keep a Gulf deployment alive under Iranian pressure, Washington would have to break the detection-to-strike chain instead of waiting for armor to absorb it. That means mine countermeasure ships opening lanes before sealift arrives, explosive ordnance teams clearing approaches, electronic warfare cells, hunting emitters, and armored engineers using the M1150 assault breacher vehicle, whose mine-clearing line charge can clear a lane 8 meters wide by 100 meters long to force vehicles through mined landing areas. The Navy lists 14 Avenger-class mine countermeasures ships, each 224 feet long, and built to find, classify, and destroy moored and bottom mines. And during Poseidon's Chalice in 2024, USS Gladiator and USS Sentry drilled in the Arabian Sea because, as Lieutenant Commander Joseph Minich said, "Our collaboration has enabled us to enhance our core mine warfare capabilities." On land, the shield now has to see low, jam fast, and move under drone exposure. General Michael Kurilla warned in 2025 that US service members in CENTCOM had come under fire by nearly 400 unmanned aerial systems, 350 rockets, 50 ballistic missiles, and 30 cruise missiles, while armored officers writing in Military Review argued that formations will need embedded detection and jamming capabilities at the battalion level and counter-drone tools that operate on the move. In practice, that means Bradley's screening with scouts, mortars tied to drone feeds, decoys masking logistics nodes, and commanders treating convoy halts as a signature management fight, not a pause. The strategic cost of sending Abrams and Bradleys toward the Gulf would be measured not at the port, but across every theater using the same force pool. The 3rd Infantry Division spent 9 months in Northeast Europe, ran 12 exercises and 4 training center rotations, and its mission there was to provide combat-credible forces to VCOR, while its sustainment brigade supported 9 brigades across 12 countries and delivered 4 million gallons of fuel. Marge, General Christopher R. Norrie said, "We conducted rigorous training in realistic training environments with our NATO allies and partners to ensure that we're all ready and lethal, showing those armored units were committed before any Gulf crisis. Accelerated. That trade-off is sharper than it looks." Army reporting shows 1st Battalion, 37th Armor Regiment, from 2nd Armored Brigade Combat Team, 1st Armored Division, spent July 2023 to April 2024 as a rotational force in EUCOM, and the Center for Army Lessons Learned notes that an armored brigade's S1, S4, and medical authorization totals 23 personnel, with sections often arriving at combat training centers with less than 35% of assigned strength. Move 1 brigade east, and the United States is not repositioning Abrams and Bradleys. It is shifting planners, maintainers, convoy managers, and fuel coordinators whose absence is felt elsewhere immediately. A Gulf surge would therefore signal power to Iran, but also expose how tightly deterrence now rides on a limited heavy force base. This is why a rush of Abrams and Bradleys toward the Gulf would signal far more than another deployment order. It would reveal whether Washington can fuse prepositioned stocks, sealift, air defense, mine clearing, fuel distribution, repair capacity, and combined arms command into one uninterrupted chain before Iran or its proxies can fracture it. The U.S. Army's 2025 deployment handbook states that, historically, 10% of materiel sent to a theater arrives by airlift, and the remaining 90% arrives by sealift, and Military Sealift Command says more than 90% of USS warfighters' equipment and supplies travel by sea, which means the true contest is not simply tank versus missile, but network versus network. That is the final measure of danger. General Michael Kurilla warned in that Iran's proxy network threatens some of the most vital terrain in the world, and if a crisis forces American armor, Patriot batteries, engineers, and sustainment units into the Gulf at speed, every port berth, convoy route, fuel point, and radar track becomes part of a single high-stakes race. If that chain holds, the United States can turn 73-ton Abrams, Bradley fighting vehicles, and sealift capacity of more than 300,000 square feet per LMSR into real pressure. If it breaks, the cost arrives fast. And if you want more military breakdowns built on real numbers, real systems, and real strategic logic, subscribe and stay in the fight with us right here.